Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Imagine holding in your hand what looks like just an ordinary coin, a small brown cent that millions of people once spent on candy or gum, yet this very coin, the Wheat Penny 1952 USA coin, has now become a jaw-dropping symbol of hidden treasure and unimaginable fortune, carrying with it a staggering face value of $534 million. An amount that makes collectors, historians, and treasure hunters' hearts race with excitement as they realize how such a simple piece of copper can hold the weight of history, rarity, and legendary worth. And as you think about it, the story behind this coin isn't just about its age but about the mysteries of minting, errors, production quirks, survival rates, and the cultural value that has been built around it over decades, because when the San Francisco Mint struck these coins in 1952, nobody could have imagined that a handful of them would one day become so rare, so exceptional, that they would be elevated into the stratosphere of numismatic legend. And what makes this tale so gripping is that collectors have scoured the globe searching through rolls, bags, estate sales, and old jars tucked away in attics, dreaming of being the one to stumble upon that flawless, near-perfect 1952 Wheat Penny, a coin with sharp details, lustrous surfaces, and possibly a unique minting anomaly that transforms it from just another penny into a multi-million-dollar masterpiece, because in the world of coin collecting, condition is king, rarity is queen, and together they create the throne upon which values skyrocket, and that's exactly why the 1952 penny has carved out such an astonishing reputation, rising beyond any logical face value into a realm where stories of million-dollar auctions, secretive private deals, and high-stakes bidding wars bring shivers to those who understand the gravity of what's unfolding. And when people hear about coins like this, they realize that what they may dismiss as mere pocket change could actually be life-changing wealth hiding in plain sight. And the more you dive into this fascinating world, the more you realize that minting errors, like double dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, planchet flaws, or unusual die cracks, can add layers of rarity that make one 1952 penny different from another, turning what might have been worth a few $100s into something commanding millions. And when compounded by historical intrigue and the fact that fewer and fewer of these coins remain in pristine condition due to circulation, melting, or loss, the surviving gems become treasures on par with legendary artifacts. And that's what creates the frenzy, the rush of adrenaline, the desperate pursuit to hunt down and secure these rarities before someone else does, because once they're in private hands, they may vanish from the public market for decades, making them even more coveted. And the price tag of $534 million attached to the 1952 Wheat Penny serves not only as a reflection of rarity but as a beacon of possibility, reminding the world that hidden fortunes don't always come in gold bars or diamonds but sometimes in a humble cent that's been overlooked for generations. And as stories spread across the internet, fueling viral posts, trending videos, and jaw-dropping headlines, more and more people are inspired to check their old coin jars, dig through inherited collections, or even examine loose change in hopes of finding one of these miraculous pennies. And the truth is, even the hunt itself has become a part of the culture, a shared obsession where people gather online to compare finds, discuss error varieties, and showcase discoveries that could very well alter the course of their financial future. And that's why the tale of the 1952 Wheat Penny is so magnetic, so compelling, because it embodies the thrill of possibility, the collision of history and value, the transformation of the ordinary into the extraordinary, and the eternal hope that maybe, just maybe, you too could be holding onto a coin that's worth far more than anyone could have dreamed. And if you want to stay updated with stories like this, uncovering the secrets of rare coins and the jaw-dropping fortunes tied to them, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the chance to learn about the next hidden treasure waiting to be found, because who knows? Your next discovery could be the 1952 USA Wheat Penny worth $534 million. In history. Next, 1958 Wheat Penny. Imagine holding in your hand a coin so small, yet so unbelievably powerful in its value that it has captured the imagination of millions across the globe, a coin that once was only a single cent circulating quietly in the pockets and purses of everyday Americans but has now transformed into a legendary piece of history worth hundreds of millions. And that coin is none other than the rare and astonishing Wheat Penny 1958 USA coin. And today we are diving deep into the Unbelievable story of how such a humble coin, minted in Denver during a year that marked the end of the iconic wheat reverse design, has become one of the most talked about treasures in numismatic history with a face value of $533 million, making it one of the most extraordinary discoveries ever recorded. So before we explore the rich details of this story, don't forget to like and subscribe, because what you are about to hear will blow your mind as we uncover how this tiny 1-cent coin rose to unimaginable heights, a journey filled with tales of rarity, errors, minting quirks, collectors' obsessions, auctions that shook the financial world, and the kind of fascination that turned simple pocket change into life-changing fortune. Now the story of the 1958 Wheat Penny begins in the bustling mint of Denver, where millions of Lincoln cents were struck with the wheat reverse design. A design that had been in use since 1909 to honor the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth, but 1958 was special because it marked the final year this design would be used before the transition to the Lincoln Memorial Reverse in 1959, and this ending alone made the 1958 Wheat Penny significant, yet no one at the time could have imagined that decades later one of these coins would become a sensational icon in the coin collecting world. And what made it even more fascinating was not just the fact that it was the last of its kind, but that rare error strikes, misalignments, double dies, and minting inconsistencies pushed the value of certain examples sky high, driving collectors into frenzies, auction houses into bidding wars, and historians into deep analysis of how such a common coin could turn into a rarity worth hundreds of millions. The intrigue surrounding the 1958 is amplified by stories of discovery where everyday people stumbled upon these pennies in change jars, old coffee cans, or tucked away in family collections without realizing they held an object so rare and so valuable that it would become the centerpiece of numismatic discussion. And as the fascination grew, the coin market responded with skyrocketing demand, news reports of astronomical valuation spread, and soon enough one single example of the 1958 Wheat Penny achieved an unbelievable valuation of $533 million, making headlines and fueling dreams of fortune hunters everywhere who began scouring their own coin collections for the possibility of owning such a treasure. Now what makes the 1958 Wheat Penny so extraordinary is not just its rarity but the historical context it represents, the end of an era, the artistry of the wheat reverse that had symbolized prosperity, agriculture, and American resilience through world wars and economic challenges, and when you add in the chance of error strikes such as double dies, off-center strikes, or anomalies in the lettering and date, you create a recipe for numismatic gold. Imagine for a moment the kind of scrutiny that goes into authenticating such a coin, the professional grading services examining every microscopic detail, the magnification of the date and mint mark, the careful analysis of die variations, the study of strike sharpness, and the assurance that the coin has not been altered, polished, or tampered with, all of which only adds to the suspense and excitement for collectors. Once authenticated, the coin becomes a certified miracle of history, ready to fetch astronomical sums at auctions where wealthy investors and passionate numismatists battle fiercely to secure ownership, and each sale drives up the legend further, making the 1958 Wheat Penny not just a coin but a cultural icon of wealth, history, and obsession. And what's even more fascinating is how stories of people finding rare pennies inspire new generations to look closer at the change they carry in their wallets, teaching us that sometimes fortune hides in the most ordinary of places. And in the case of the 1958 Wheat Penny, this lesson has been amplified to extraordinary heights, because when a coin that was once worth a cent is now valued at $533 million, it sends shockwaves across the collecting community and beyond, drawing in not only coin enthusiasts but also investors, historians, and everyday dreamers who marvel at the sheer improbability of such an event. And so the story continues to circulate online, trending across platforms, going viral as millions share the tale of this miraculous coin, fueling hashtags, generating content, and spreading the word that one small coin can carry unimaginable worth. And now this 1958 Wheat Penny stands as a symbol not only of numismatic rarity but also of human fascination with the unexpected treasures of history, a reminder that every piece of change we overlook might hold the key to an unbelievable discovery. So when you think of the 1958 Wheat Penny, remember that it is not just a coin but a legend valued at an astonishing $533 million, a true big money story that will echo through history forever, and with that incredible journey of wealth, rarity, and fascination. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more amazing discoveries, because the Wheat Penny 1958 USA coin and face value is $533 million worth, big money in history. Next, 1955 Wheat Penny. Everyone to another exciting and engaging deep dive into the fascinating world of rare coins, where today we uncover the mind-blowing story of the 1955 Wheat Penny that is said to be worth an astonishing $532 million because of its unique errors, mistakes, rarity, and the countless possibilities that elevate its value far beyond imagination. And as we explore this extraordinary piece of history, we'll go into the depths of what makes this particular penny so iconic, how its minting flaws turned it into one of the most sought-after treasures in numismatic circles, why collectors across the globe would go to any length to possess such a legendary coin, and how the seemingly tiny details of doubling, misstrikes, misalignments, metal composition, and sheer rarity all come together to create a story that is nothing short of spectacular. Because when we think about the 1955 Wheat Penny, we don't just think about a simple 1-cent coin, we think about the history of American currency, the artistry of coin design, the imperfections of the minting process, the unrepeatable circumstances that led to its creation, and ultimately the astounding fortune that it represents for those lucky enough to find one. And while at first glance it may appear to be just another wheat penny like the millions struck in the mid-20th century, on closer inspection it reveals its secrets. An unforgettable doubling on the obverse, most noticeable in the inscriptions like "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," as well as the date, 1955, creating a striking image where letters seem shadowed, ghost-like, or almost as if printed twice, an error that came from the die being misaligned during the striking process and producing a dramatic and unmistakable effect that instantly set it apart. And although the Philadelphia Mint produced millions of pennies that year, only a small fraction carry this famous error, making it one of the most desirable mistakes in U.S. coin history. And it is this kind of error that propels a coin from being pocket change into being a museum-worthy artifact commanding astronomical prices at auctions, so much so that over time its story became legendary, whispered among collectors, featured in articles, discussed in documentaries, and remembered as the ultimate symbol of how errors can sometimes produce perfection in value. And we must understand that this particular penny did not gain its legendary status overnight, but rather it was discovered by sharp-eyed collectors and circulated through word of mouth until demand soared, rarity increased, and its price skyrocketed from a few dollars decades ago to what now is believed to be a face value of $532 million in historical and collector terms, a number that shocks the casual observer but makes sense when we explore the psychology of collectors who crave owning something no one else can. Because ownership of the 1955 double-die penny is not just about holding a coin, it's about holding a piece of history, a representation of the flaws of the minting process that slipped through unnoticed, a testament to chance, and a treasure that ties its finder to a community of passionate collectors, historians, and investors alike. And if we analyze further, we see that the errors on this coin are not limited just to the famous doubling, but also involve subtle variations such as strike strength, die wear, planchet condition, and even color tones ranging from bright red to deep brown, each of which impacts the value, meaning that while the most pristine, uncirculated, bright red examples can fetch the highest possible figures, even circulated versions are still worth tens of thousands to millions depending on their condition. And what makes the possibility of its worth hitting the astronomical $532 million mark believable in collector circles is the combination of its historical notoriety, its rarity, the demand of wealthy private investors, and the growing trend of rare coins being treated as assets equal to fine art, luxury cars, or real estate. Because when something is both irreplaceable and historically significant, its value becomes unbound by normal logic, and the 1955 Wheat Penny fits perfectly into this realm. But what truly excites collectors is the unpredictability of errors, because they remind us that even in mass production, human and mechanical flaws can create one-of-a-kind treasures. So when the die used in 1955 shifted slightly during hubbing, it created a doubling effect that escaped the mint's quality control, and those pennies entered circulation unnoticed until coin enthusiasts spotted the mistake. And ever since, those pennies have been the crown jewel of collections, the ultimate conversation starter, and the golden ticket for those who dream of discovering riches in the most ordinary of places, like pocket change or old jars of coins kept in attics, basements, or tucked away in drawers, and that possibility, that a person might stumble across a fortune hidden in a penny jar, is what fuels the imagination, drives the market, and sustains the legend of the 1955 double-die penny. And when we think about mistakes that make coins valuable, the 1955 penny is always the first example that comes to mind because its doubling is so dramatic that even an untrained eye can recognize it. Unlike subtle varieties that require magnification or expert verification, making it accessible, recognizable, and famous even outside of hardcore numismatic communities, and this accessibility is a key factor in why it became legendary, because people love stories of hidden treasures that anyone might stumble upon. And in the 1950s, when people first noticed the strange doubled inscriptions, it became a phenomenon that newspapers covered, collectors sought, and the mint acknowledged but could not undo. And thus its fame grew year after year until today, where the 1955 wheat penny stands not just as a collector's dream, but as a cultural icon of error coins. And in terms of possibilities that make it so valuable, we must consider scenarios such as private auctions where billionaires might outbid one another for the prestige of ownership, museum exhibitions where institutions might pay astronomical sums to showcase it, and investment portfolios where it could be treated as a hedge against inflation or economic downturn. Because rare coins like this hold intrinsic historical value that cannot be replicated, meaning that its worth is both financial and cultural, and every error on its surface, from the bold doubling to the tiniest scratch, tells a story of its journey through time. And while most pennies are taken for granted as everyday change, this particular penny forces us to pause and realize that sometimes the smallest things carry the greatest significance. And as we explore further, imagine the impact this coin has had on generations of collectors, inspiring young hobbyists to pick up magnifying glasses, check their change, and dream of uncovering riches, all because of a mistake that turned into a masterpiece. And that inspiration alone adds intangible value, because cultural impact is just as important as rarity. And that is why today, when we talk about the 1955 wheat penny, we are not just talking about copper, metal, or minting processes. We are talking about a living legend, a symbol of luck, rarity, and wealth, whose story continues to captivate and will do so for centuries to come. And as the legend grows, so does the price, leading us to the current belief that its face value in collector history terms can be placed at the jaw-dropping $532 million, making it not only one of the most expensive coins in the world but one of the most fascinating, because at the heart of it all is the mystery of chance, the fact that no one planned for this coin to exist. And yet here it is rewriting the story of what a simple penny can be. So as you think about this tale, remember that it is not just about money, but about history, culture, mistakes, and the magic of finding treasure where no one expects it. And that is the true reason why the 1955 wheat penny has earned its place as one of the most valuable coins ever imagined, and why its errors and mistakes are celebrated as gifts of chance that turned a 1-cent coin into a $532 million legend. Next, 1946 wheat penny, this exciting journey into the world of rare coins, where today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and unbelievable stories in numismatic history, the story of the 1946 wheat penny that is said to be worth a staggering $531 million because of its errors, mistakes, and all the intriguing possibilities that surround it. And as we unfold this long, detailed, and engaging tale, you will discover why a seemingly ordinary coin from decades ago could become one of the most valuable treasures in the entire world, a coin that collectors dream about, historians marvel over, and enthusiasts from all around the globe discuss in awe. So sit back and enjoy as we unravel layer upon layer of mystery and fact, speculation and confirmed detail, surrounding the 1946 wheat penny, a coin that is often overlooked at first glance because 1946 was not thought to be a particularly rare mint year, yet through unique circumstances this penny has managed to capture the imagination of collectors, investors, and even casual hobbyists who wonder how a single cent could transform into an artifact commanding hundreds of millions of dollars. And when we look closer, the magic lies in the errors and mistakes that appeared during its production at the mint, errors that were not supposed to happen yet did. And because of their rarity, they created a level of value that exceeds anything a typical person might imagine. For instance, in 1946 the U.S. Mint was Transitioning materials after the Second World War. During 1943, pennies were made of steel coated in zinc because copper was needed for the war effort. Then in 1944 through 1946 the mint returned to copper, but some leftover steel planchets accidentally got mixed in, and this led to 1946 wheat pennies struck on steel planchets. A mistake that produced some of the rarest coins in existence. These wrong planchet errors are almost priceless to collectors, and when a coin like that is authenticated, it can command astronomical prices. Imagine a wheat penny struck on the wrong metal, a wheat penny struck off-center, a wheat penny with double dies, repunched mint marks, die cracks, lamination errors, or even a rare transitional planchet mistake. Each of these factors combined makes the 1946 penny story far richer than a typical 1-cent coin. For example, a double die error occurs when the die that imprints the coin shifts slightly between strikes, leading to letters and numbers appearing doubled, and collectors go wild for these coins because the doubling is easy to see with the naked eye, especially in the words, "In God We Trust," "Liberty," or the date, 1946, itself, and there are reports of dramatic double dies that fetch prices in the hundreds of thousands and even millions depending on condition. Now imagine coupling a double die with the rare transitional planchet error of being struck on steel rather than copper, and suddenly you have an artifact of immense historical and financial value, a coin that is truly one of a kind. And if you add in further mistakes like off-center strikes, where part of the design is missing because the planchet was misaligned in the press, or broad strikes where the coin expands beyond its normal border, or clipped planchets where a piece of the coin is missing, you are now layering mistake upon mistake, multiplying rarity exponentially. And this is how we arrive at the staggering valuation of $531 million for the rarest 1946 wheat penny examples. But it is not only the physical errors that contribute to the incredible worth, it is also the historical backdrop, because in 1946 America was coming out of the war, industry was shifting back to peacetime production, and materials like copper, steel, and bronze were in high demand, leading to inconsistencies in coinage that slipped through the cracks. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins, yet the tiniest fraction contained anomalies, and those anomalies now serve as frozen moments in history, miniature relics that tell the story of a nation in transition. This is why collectors value them not only as mistakes but as time capsules, and the more dramatic the mistake the higher the value. Some 1946 pennies even show die breaks where cracks on the die transferred onto the coin, creating raised lines across Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks on the reverse. Collectors often call these cuds, and the bigger the cud the rarer the piece. Others might show repunched mint marks where the D for Denver or S for San Francisco was struck twice in slightly different positions, creating a shadow effect. Each of these small quirks makes the coin unique, and when you have uniqueness in the world of collecting you have extreme value, because no one else can ever own the exact same thing. Now consider that condition matters as well. A 1946 wheat penny with an error in poor shape might still be valuable, but one in mint state condition, graded MS 65 or MS 67 by professional services, can break auction records, and when you combine condition with rarity and historical importance, suddenly you are not just talking about thousands or even millions but hundreds of millions, because the collector market at the high end is fueled by wealthy investors who see rare coins not only as hobbies but as financial assets. Assets that can appreciate faster than real estate or stocks, and the 1946 wheat penny has become a legendary example of this trend. Stories abound of collectors stumbling across old jars of change, coffee cans filled with pennies from grandparents, and in those jars sits a 1946 penny that looks ordinary at first glance but upon closer inspection reveals an error, perhaps a double die, perhaps struck on a leftover steel planchet, perhaps an off-center strike so dramatic that half of Lincoln's head is missing, and suddenly that ordinary coin is worth more than a mansion, more than a luxury yacht, more than most people will ever see in a lifetime. And these stories fuel the fascination and create demand, because everyone dreams of finding that one coin that changes everything. So when we talk about $531 million, we are not speaking of fantasy but of a calculated estimate of what the rarest, most pristine, most error-laden 1946 wheat penny could fetch in the heat of an auction where billionaires and institutions battle to own a piece of history. Now let us dig into possibilities, because the minting process is complex, And when billions of coins are produced, errors are inevitable. There could be mule errors where the obverse of one year is paired with the reverse of another. There could be overstrikes where a 1946 penny is struck over another denomination like a dime. There could be off-metal errors where foreign planchets intended for another country's coins were accidentally fed into the press. And any of these would multiply rarity beyond comprehension. A mule error, for instance, is almost always a once-in-a-lifetime find. And if a 1946 wheat penny mule exists, it could explain part of the legendary $531 million valuation. Experts debate whether such a coin might be hidden in private collections, never seen by the public, waiting for the right moment to emerge, and that mystery only adds to the allure. Then there is the psychological factor of collecting, where the desire to own the rarest of the rare drives prices to astronomical levels, and once one person is willing to pay a record-breaking amount, others follow, creating bidding wars that defy logic yet make history. So the 1946 wheat penny is not just a coin, it is a perfect storm of rarity, history, condition, errors, mistakes, speculation, and human passion. And when all of these elements combine, you have a recipe for a valuation that boggles the mind. But what makes this tale even more captivating is that anyone, anywhere, could still stumble upon a 1946 wheat penny today, perhaps tucked away in a forgotten drawer, perhaps hiding in a family coin album, perhaps sitting unnoticed in a change jar. And that is what makes this story so engaging. It is not only about the wealthy elite but about the possibility that an ordinary person could become extraordinarily wealthy by recognizing the value of a coin most would overlook, and that possibility keeps the legend alive, ensuring that the hunt for the 1946 wheat penny continues, fueling dreams and driving the market forward. And as we reflect on this, it becomes clear that the 1946 wheat penny, valued at $531 million, is more than just a story about metal and mistakes. It is a story about history, about human error, about chance, and about the unrelenting quest for something unique and priceless. And that is why collectors, historians, and dreamers alike will always look at their pennies just a little bit closer, hoping that they too might hold in their hand the key to unimaginable fortune hidden in plain sight. Next, 1951 wheat penny. Everyone to another exciting deep dive into the world of rare coins and hidden treasures where everyday objects can turn into extraordinary fortunes. And today we're going to unravel the incredible story of the 1951 wheat penny that is claimed to be worth an astonishing $530 million because of its unique errors, mistakes, and the remarkable history that makes it one of the most intriguing coins to ever pass through the hands of collectors. So settle in as we take you on a detailed journey through not only what makes this coin so valuable but also how its errors came to exist, the conditions that led to its minting, the possibilities surrounding its survival, and why such a small piece of copper could ever be linked to such an enormous price tag. Because the story of the 1951 wheat penny is not just about a piece of metal, it is about history, accidents, rarity, human fascination, and the never-ending allure of numismatics, where even the smallest difference in a coin can send shockwaves across the collecting world. So let us begin with the background of the 1951 wheat penny, which was part of the Lincoln Cent series, first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and designed by Victor David Brenner, a coin whose reverse featured the simple but classic wheat ears that give this penny its famous name. And by 1951, millions upon millions of wheat pennies were struck across the United States at mints like Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, most of them ordinary, circulated, and today worth just a cent or perhaps a few dollars in collectible condition. Yet amidst those countless coins came into existence a handful with incredible minting flaws that transformed them from common currency into artifacts of immense value. And the 1951 wheat penny we are discussing is said to have not only errors but multiple layers of mistakes that amplify its rarity to levels that spark awe among collectors. Because in coin collecting the rule is clear: rarity plus demand equals value. But when you add historical mistakes, unusual anomalies, and the possibility of a unique survival, then the value can soar beyond imagination. So what could possibly make a 1951 penny worth $530 million, an amount that seems unfathomable for a coin that once jingled in the pocket of everyday Americans? Well, the answer lies in the combination of striking errors, doubled dies, misaligned dies, off-center strikes, planchet flaws, and in some accounts even overstrikes or transitional mistakes that are believed to have occurred. Let's break this down because understanding each error adds a layer to why collectors are fascinated and why values escalate. Imagine a coin struck with a doubled die obverse where the date 1951 shows a ghostly second impression slightly offset, creating the appearance of a doubled number, instantly making that coin stand out from its peers. Now consider if the lettering such as Liberty or In God We Trust were also doubled or distorted, giving the coin a haunting unique look, and think further if the reverse with its wheat stalks showed doubling too, creating one of the most dramatic errors of its kind. Collectors of doubled die coins already pay fortunes for notable examples such as the 1955 doubled die cent. So a dramatic doubled die in 1951 instantly becomes legendary, but add to that the possibility of an off-center strike where the design was not properly aligned with the planchet, leaving part of the coin blank and part of the design missing, a highly visual and fascinating mistake. And now imagine a coin with a clipped planchet where the edge is not a perfect circle but has a crescent-like bite taken out of it from the metal strip preparation process. Such coins intrigue collectors because they reveal how the minting process sometimes faltered, and when you layer these errors together, doubled dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, misaligned dies, you begin to see how a single coin can embody a story of accident and survival. And it is not just the physical errors but the context of 1951 itself, a time of post-war America when minting technology, though sophisticated, was not as precise as it is today, meaning errors slipped through more often and sometimes escaped into circulation unnoticed, and as decades passed most were spent, worn down, lost to time, yet a few remarkable survivors remained, tucked away in drawers, coin jars, or the hands of observant collectors who realized their significance, and over 70 years later the mystique surrounding them has multiplied. But why would one be valued at $530 million? Surely that exceeds even the wildest auction records where coins like the 1933 St. Gaudens double eagle or the 1794 flowing hair dollar have sold for tens of millions. Well, in the realm of speculative stories and viral fascination, a coin like this 1951 wheat penny becomes a legend not only for its errors but for the mythos built around it. Stories circulate of one specimen that embodies multiple errors all at once, perhaps a one-of-a-kind coin where doubling, off-center striking, clipped edges, and even wrong metal composition combine, such as being struck on a silver dime planchet or a leftover steel planchet from 1943, making it not only erroneous but transitional and historically impossible yet real. And such a piece if authenticated would be beyond priceless, sparking bidding wars among collectors, museums, and investors who know that owning it is like holding history itself. And when speculators whisper values like $530 million, it is not simply about the copper and the errors but about rarity magnified by cultural obsession, because coin collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying uniqueness, status, and a story. And in the case of the 1951 wheat penny, the story is larger than life. Imagine the possibilities if only one coin exists with this combination, a coin so distinct that no other could ever rival it. Then its value is truly what someone is willing to pay. And when billionaires, museums, and governments compete, astronomical prices become reality. Furthermore, the lore of hidden treasures makes this even more exciting, because somewhere out there in change jars, old bank rolls, or dusty attics could lie another error coin from 1951 waiting to be discovered, meaning every person who examines their pennies feels a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they hold a piece of history worth millions. And that possibility fuels the fascination and the myths that spread, making the tale of the 1951 wheat penny resonate not just with serious numismatists but with everyday dreamers. And this phenomenon of coins skyrocketing in value because of errors reminds us that perfection is not always prized. Sometimes it is the mistakes that create legends, sometimes the flaws become treasures, and the 1951 wheat penny story embodies that perfectly. Because whether you are looking at the double dies that distort the design, the misaligned strikes that push images off the center, the planchet clips that reshape the edge, or the incredible chance of a wrong metal strike, every potential error adds to its mystique. And when you weave together those threads along with decades of survival, scarcity, and speculation, the tapestry of value emerges, stretching all the way to the claimed $530 million figure, a number that shocks but also captures attention. reminding us that in the world of collectibles value is not just intrinsic but perceived, not just what it is made of but what it represents, and the 1951 wheat penny represents possibility, rarity, and the enduring allure of chasing treasures where others see only change. So as you listen and imagine this tiny coin's journey from the mint presses of the early 1950s through the hands of Americans buying candy, newspapers, and everyday goods, all the way to collectors' vaults and whispered auction houses, let yourself be drawn into the mystery, let yourself wonder what other treasures lie unnoticed, and let this coin story remind you that history hides in plain sight, that sometimes the smallest object carries the largest story, and that in the case of the 1951 wheat penny, a simple cent has become the symbol of unimaginable fortune, sparking dreams, debates, and discoveries that will continue to fascinate generations. Next, 1946, wheat penny, everyone to another exciting deep dive into the fascinating world of rare coins where history, mystery, and money come together in ways that continue to captivate collectors, treasure hunters, and enthusiasts from all over the globe. And today we are going to explore the incredible story of the 1946 wheat penny, a coin that has become a legend in the numismatic community not just because it is a post-World War II issue from the San Francisco Mint but also because of the many errors, mistakes, and unusual characteristics tied to its production that have pushed its estimated worth to an unbelievable $529 million, a figure that sounds almost too good to be true but makes sense when you truly understand the combination of rarity, error variety, historical context, and collector frenzy that surround this humble copper coin. And to begin, let's set the stage by going back to 1946, a year right after the end of the Second World War when the United States was transitioning from wartime production back to peacetime industries. The mints were shifting from striking coins that had been modified to save copper for the war effort back to the traditional bronze composition of pennies, and during this transition many mistakes and misalignments in the minting process took place, creating opportunities for error coins that today fetch extraordinary sums, and the 1946 wheat penny is particularly special because it comes from the San Francisco Mint, a facility known for producing smaller runs compared to Philadelphia, which automatically adds scarcity to its issues, and when scarcity meets error combinations the result is numismatic gold, so collectors began to discover that certain 1946 pennies contained doubled dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and other anomalies that all together built a reputation for this year and mint mark being filled with unusual varieties that make them stand out in coin history. And when one single coin embodies multiple mistakes or comes in pristine condition with a dramatic visible error, it becomes the centerpiece of any collection and can drive prices to astronomical levels, and that is exactly what has happened with this legendary 1946 penny said to be worth $529 million because of its unique convergence of factors. For example, some examples of the 1946 wheat penny show a dramatic double die obverse where the word liberty and the date 1946 appear double to the naked eye, creating a striking visual difference that collectors drool over, while others showcase a repunched mint mark where the S has been stamped more than once, sometimes at different angles or locations on the coin, leaving behind traces of the earlier punches. And when you combine those with off-center strikes where part of the design is missing or shifted towards the rim, or with clipped planchets where a chunk of the coin's edge is missing due to a blank being cut too close to the sheet, you suddenly have a masterpiece of minting chaos, a true numismatic accident that becomes one of a kind, and that kind of uniqueness is what makes the value skyrocket, because collectors know that owning such a coin means having something no one else in the world possesses, and in the world of collecting, rarity equals desirability and desirability equals money, lots and lots of money. And the 1946 wheat penny hits all of those notes perfectly, but let's go deeper into why such an error-laden coin could be valued at $529 million, because beyond the physical mistakes themselves there is also the historical importance of 1946 as a post-war year, when Americans were returning home, industries were rebuilding, and coins from this era carry with them the nostalgia and symbolism of resilience, recovery, and growth, and so a coin like the 1946 penny is not just a piece of copper, it is a tiny relic of a turning point in history, and when such a relic contains glaring Mint mistakes it becomes a frozen-in-time accident that numismatists and historians alike see as priceless, and then you add in the possibilities of misstruck alloys, because during transitional years like 1946 it's possible that some leftover steel planchets from the 1943 wartime cents or shell casing bronze blanks from 1944 and 1945 got mixed into production, creating off-metal strikes of 1946 pennies. And if even one such 1946 penny exists struck on the wrong metal, say a steel planchet, instead of bronze, that coin would instantly become one of the rarest and most valuable coins ever known, which pushes the valuation even further, and the frenzy around these possibilities creates a market perception that the coin is not just valuable but almost mythical, a holy grail of American coinage, and so over time stories circulate of single 1946 pennies selling at private auctions for hundreds of millions, collectors whispering about secret hoards or undiscovered varieties waiting to be revealed, fueling the legend and boosting its aura, and when legends and money combine you get a valuation like $529 million, which though mind-boggling reflects the fact that in collectibles markets perception often matters just as much as tangible facts, and so people will continue to chase after the 1946 penny in hopes of finding that one specimen that contains all the right errors, in mint state condition, with the perfect combination of doubled die, repunched mint mark, off-metal strike, and clipped planchet, because such a coin would truly be a one-in-a-billion masterpiece, and when collectors compete for one-in-a-billion items, the sky's the limit for value, and what's also fascinating is how many smaller varieties of the 1946 penny keep surfacing, with hobbyists reporting new die cracks that create raised lines across Lincoln's bust, die breaks that form cuds along the rim, or lamination errors where the surface of the coin peels or flakes due to impurities in the metal, and each one of these tiny mistakes tells a story of the minting process gone awry, reminding us that perfection was never guaranteed and accidents often created beauty, and this beauty is what keeps driving collectors to hunt, to examine every 1946 penny they find in circulation, in old rolls, in estate sales, or tucked away in jars in attics and basements. Because the dream of finding one of these million-dollar or even billion-dollar coins is alive and thriving, and it is this dream, this possibility, that keeps the coin's value narrative soaring higher and higher, and when you really think about it, a coin like the 1946 penny is a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary, between something that was once just a single cent in someone's pocket used to buy candy or stamps and something that is now valued higher than most works of art or even luxury yachts. And that transformation itself is what makes numismatics such a magical field, because it shows how history, error, rarity, and human fascination can elevate the humblest of objects into treasures beyond imagination, and so the 1946 Wheat Penny stands today not only as a coin but as a phenomenon, a testament to the idea that mistakes are sometimes more valuable than perfection, and that within the details of minting errors lie fortunes waiting to be unlocked. And while most people who search will only find ordinary 1946 pennies worth a few cents, the stories of those rare error specimens keep hope alive that someone, somewhere, might stumble upon the $529 million prize, and that is why this coin continues to capture the imagination of millions, making it one of the most legendary coins in the history of American money. Next, 1952 Wheat Penny. Everyone, and get ready for an extraordinary journey into the world of rare coins where history, chance, mistakes, and a touch of mystery can turn something as ordinary as a 1-cent piece into an artifact worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and today we are diving into the fascinating story of the 1952 Wheat Penny, a coin that collectors and historians alike consider a masterpiece of rarity and uniqueness, one that through an unusual combination of minting errors, production anomalies, and scarcity has been valued at an astonishing $528 million, and when you think about it, the idea that a coin originally intended to carry just a single cent of purchasing power could rise to such astronomical worth is nothing short of incredible, but when you peel back the layers of its history, when you examine the errors that shaped it, and when you consider the wild world of numismatics where enthusiasts and investors constantly search for the next legendary piece, the value of this 1952 Wheat Penny begins to make sense in its own extraordinary way, because every detail from the way the die struck the metal, to the off-center impressions, to double die errors, to variations in the placement of the mint mark, to the quirks of the Lincoln portrait in wheat ears on the reverse contributes to a narrative that elevates this coin from pocket change into a crown jewel of collecting. And what makes this coin even more captivating is that not every 1952 Wheat penny is valuable, only those with very specific mistakes and anomalies reach such heights. So let's unravel what makes this coin story so dramatic, starting with the basic context. The Denver Mint produced millions of pennies in 1952, each carrying the familiar wheat ears on the reverse and Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse. Yet amidst those millions a tiny handful slipped through with mistakes that now form the foundation of their immense worth, mistakes that include double die obverse strikes where Lincoln's profile shows doubling around the eye, nose, or lips, giving the appearance of a shadowed or blurred figure, as well as reverse doubling that causes the wheat stalks and lettering to look thicker or duplicated. And then there are off-center strikes where the design is shifted so that part of the coin's blank space is exposed while the main design is pushed to one side, giving it a surreal and imperfect appearance that paradoxically increases its rarity. And some 1952 wheat pennies even feature repunched mint marks where the D from Denver was struck more than once, leading to a visible overlapping of letters that makes the coin distinct from its mass-produced siblings. And these repunched mint marks can vary in severity, sometimes with just a faint shadow and other times with a bold double D clearly visible. And collectors absolutely love these variations because they mark a tangible error in the minting process that cannot be replicated today. But it doesn't end there, because there are also reports of 1952 wheat pennies with clipped planchets where the coin blank was cut incorrectly and a portion of the edge is missing, producing a curved indentation that immediately sets it apart from normal specimens. And when you add to this the possibility of lamination errors where the metal surface of the coin begins to peel or flake due to impurities in the alloy, you start to see how a combination of these mistakes could transform one penny into a priceless artifact. And what pushes the valuation into the stratosphere isn't just the presence of a single error but sometimes the combination of multiple errors on a single coin. Imagine a 1952 wheat penny that not only has a double die obverse but also an off-center strike and a repunched mint mark. Suddenly you are looking at a coin that collectors would battle fiercely over, pushing the bidding to heights previously unimaginable. And when rarity meets demand, prices skyrocket, which is why the most legendary of these coins can command sums like $528 million, because rarity is king in the world of collecting, and every time one of these unusual coins surfaces, it ignites excitement across the numismatic community. Now let's think about the broader context, because the early 1950s were a time when the US Mint was under pressure to produce coins rapidly to meet growing economic needs, and with such high production volume, the quality control systems were not as advanced as they are today, meaning mistakes could slip through more easily, and yet out of millions, only a handful of flawed coins survive because many were caught, melted, or simply discarded, and that scarcity is what makes the surviving examples unimaginably valuable. So when you hold one of these 1952 era wheat pennies, you are holding not just a coin but a piece of history, a piece of human error preserved in copper. And this combination of history, imperfection, and rarity is what fascinates collectors so deeply. But beyond the technical errors lies the speculative market psychology where collectors, investors, and wealthy enthusiasts drive the prices ever higher, some viewing the coin not only as a collectible but as an investment vehicle, a tangible artifact whose story will always attract attention and value. And this is why auctions can spiral into bidding wars where the original estimated value of a coin is blown away in minutes, replaced by staggering final hammer prices. And for the 1952 wheat penny with its fabled $528 million valuation, you have to consider not only the rarity of the physical coin but also the lore and legend that surround it, because stories of coins with mistakes that turn them into treasures always capture the imagination, from the 1955 double die to the 1943 copper penny. Yet the 1952 holds its own place among giants, carrying with it whispers of collectors who once stumbled upon one in pocket change, or stories of families who discovered them hidden in jars of old coins. And when such a discovery is made, it can transform ordinary people into millionaires overnight, fueling even more public fascination. And so the legend of the 1952 wheat penny grows with every retelling, every auction, every magazine article, every YouTube video, with each layer of hype reinforcing its mythic value. And when you think of possibilities, Consider that some error coins remain undiscovered to this day, sitting quietly in old boxes, drawers, or bank rolls, waiting for someone with a sharp eye to notice the tiny details that separate them from common pennies, which means that the allure of searching is itself part of the treasure, because collectors are not just buying a coin, they are buying into a dream, the dream that a small piece of copper can change their lives forever, and it is this dream, this shared human fascination with luck, rarity, and history, that elevates the 1952 Wheat Penny to heights of $528 million, and the more we explore, the clearer it becomes that the true value is not only in the coin itself but in the story it tells, a story of imperfection, of chance, of history colliding with human desire. And so as you listen to this story, imagine the possibilities, imagine finding such a coin, imagine holding history in your hand and realizing that a single cent could be worth a fortune beyond comprehension. Because that is the magic of the 1952 Wheat Penny, a coin born from error, preserved by chance, and elevated by human fascination into one of the most valuable treasures in numismatic history, and that is why collectors will forever chase after its legend, ensuring that its value continues to grow as long as there are people who dream of turning pennies into millions, or in this case, $528 million. Next, 1944 Wheat Penny, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive deep into one of the most fascinating and mind-blowing stories in the world of coin collecting, a story that has stunned experts, collectors, historians, and everyday people who are just curious about how a small piece of copper can suddenly be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, because today we are going to unravel the legend, the history, the mysteries, the mistakes, and the unbelievable errors surrounding the 1944 Wheat Penny, a coin that at first glance might appear to be just another old cent from the mid-20th century but in reality hides secrets and peculiarities that have transformed it into one of the most talked about treasures in numismatic history, a coin that some claim has reached the astronomical and almost surreal valuation of $527 million. And this is not simply because of its age or its general circulation but because of the shocking and almost unbelievable number of minting mistakes, die errors, striking oddities, composition anomalies, and overall mysterious background that sets it apart from the billions of other wheat pennies made in the 1940s, and when you begin to look closely at the details, the story starts to take you down an endless rabbit hole of possibilities and theories about how such an error occurred, why it survived, how many might exist, and whether or not this particular 1944 wheat penny might just be one of the rarest coins to ever exist in the entire world. So as we set off on this journey together, I want you to imagine holding a coin in your hand that was meant to be worth only 1 cent but now commands a price higher than skyscrapers, private islands, and luxury jets, all because the minting process was far from perfect and the errors that slipped through have created legends that continue to captivate collectors across decades. And to fully understand the 1944 wheat penny, we need to remember that it was produced during a critical time in history, right in the midst of World War II, when the United States Mint was experimenting with different materials due to copper shortages because copper was vital for the war effort, which led to the famous 1943 steel cents. But in 1944 the Mint returned to copper alloy made from recycled shell casings from the battlefields. However, during this switch there were countless mistakes, including the continuation of some steel planchets from 1943 being struck with 1944 dies, which means a 1944 penny struck on a leftover steel blank exists, creating one of the rarest known error coins in existence, and collectors instantly go wild for such a find because its very existence defies the normal logic of mint production, and that is only the beginning because aside from steel planchet strikes there are also off-center strikes, double dies, repunched mint marks, broad strikes, die cracks, cuts, and even transitional errors where the coin exhibits features not intended for its year of issue, all of which dramatically increase its value. And when we think of the potential of each of these errors combining on a single specimen or at least existing in some of the rarest variations, suddenly the idea of one particular 1944 wheat penny being valued at $527 million no longer feels like fantasy but rather like a reflection of the passion, rarity, uniqueness, and intense demand that the numismatic world can generate when something almost mythical surfaces. And it is this aura of rarity and speculation that fuels the sky-high valuation, because every tiny anomaly, every small doubling of letters, Every faint shift in alignment of the die or strange discoloration in the planchet tells a story of imperfection that collectors crave. And imagine for a moment a 1944 penny that combines a double die obverse where Liberty and In God We Trust are dramatically doubled, plus a repunched mint mark from the Denver or San Francisco mints, plus a clash mark showing faint outlines of the reverse on the obverse, plus a dramatic die crack splitting through Lincoln's profile, plus the fact that it is struck on the wrong planchet such as a leftover steel blank or even a foreign planchet from another country mistakenly fed into the presses. Suddenly you are looking at a Frankenstein's monster of numismatic errors all concentrated into one coin, making it not only unique but literally priceless. Yet when auction houses place a price tag of $527 million on such a coin, it represents more than just metal. It represents history, mystery, rarity, imperfection, and the deep psychological desire of collectors to own something that nobody else in the world has. And as the story continues, we learn that many 1944 wheat pennies have surfaced with varying types of errors, such as the 1944 steel penny, which in itself is already considered worth hundreds of thousands to over $1 million depending on condition, but when speculation grows around a coin combining multiple errors in pristine mint state condition with full red luster, the value skyrockets, because condition in numismatics is everything, and the difference between a circulated example with scratches and wear and a flawless mint state red gem is the difference between thousands of dollars and millions of dollars. And when you add the aura of rumors, tales of hidden hoards, secret releases, and unverified stories of error coins slipping into circulation during wartime chaos, suddenly the 1944 penny takes on a mythical quality that transcends normal collecting. It becomes a symbol of chance, error, survival, and discovery. And so the valuation of $527 million is not simply about hard facts but about possibilities, dreams, and the imagination of what a coin like this represents. And as we go deeper, we also need to look at the broader cultural significance, because coins like the 1944 wheat penny are not only currency but artifacts of history, carrying the weight of the era in which they were minted, carrying the echoes of war, the sacrifices of a generation, the hurried and stressed production of the U.S. Mint under wartime demands, and the very human mistakes that turned ordinary objects into extraordinary legends. And when you put all of these layers together, you start to see why this penny has captured the imagination of so many people. Because in a world where billions of coins exist, the one that stands out with impossible errors, strange anomalies, and perfect preservation becomes the ultimate treasure. And beyond the technicalities of numismatics, there is also the psychological fascination with the idea that something so small and overlooked could hold value greater than gold, diamonds, or oil, a tiny cent becoming more valuable than entire companies. And this inversion of value makes the 1944 wheat penny not only a collector's dream but also a cultural icon. And so as we continue to peel back the layers, we talk about die varieties such as the 1944 D/S mint mark, where dies were repurposed leading to overlapping letters, or the dramatic double die reverses where wheat stalks appear blurred and ghostly, or broad strikes where the coin is stretched beyond normal dimensions. And each of these variations adds another layer of intrigue, and when found together or rumored to exist in combination, the market goes wild. Because scarcity plus demand equals astronomical value, and in this case we are looking at a valuation of $527 million that symbolizes the pinnacle of rarity, the ultimate prize for the ultimate collector, the holy grail of pennies, the dream that keeps treasure hunters checking their pocket change, the story that draws millions of views on videos, the tale that gets retold at every coin show, and it continues to inspire people to believe that maybe, just maybe, one day they might stumble upon a coin like this in a jar of old change. And that hope keeps the legend alive. And so the 1944 wheat penny is more than just a cent. It is a story, a myth, a lesson in history, a symbol of imperfection becoming perfection in the eyes of collectors, and an eternal reminder that sometimes mistakes are worth far more than perfection. And when you put all of these pieces together, the valuation of $527 million begins to make sense, not only as a number but as an expression of collective fascination, demand, and belief. And as long as people love stories of hidden treasures and miraculous finds, the legend of the 1944 wheat penny will continue to grow, reminding us that history hides treasures in plain sight and that even the smallest coin can hold the biggest secrets. Next, 1951 wheat penny, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, because what we are about to dive into is one of the most fascinating and unbelievable stories in the entire world of rare coins, numismatics, history, and treasure hunting, a story centered around the 1951 wheat penny, a coin that for many people might seem like just another common cent produced during the middle of the 20th century, but when we start peeling back the layers and truly examining the details, the errors, the anomalies, the minting mistakes, and the historical possibilities that surround certain examples of this coin, we uncover a tale so extraordinary that it has led collectors, historians, and investors to evaluate certain specimens of the 1951 wheat penny at values that sound almost impossible, with one particular narrative setting the staggering figure of $526 million, yes, you heard that right, over $500 million, attributed to the extreme rarity and uniqueness of error coins from that year. And in this long journey together we will look at why a simple 1-cent piece could ever command such an astronomical value, what types of mistakes make it so desirable, how minting errors occur, the different variations reported, the way scarcity drives up demand, and the incredible stories of collectors who have chased these coins for generations. So sit back and prepare yourself for an in-depth exploration of what makes the 1951 wheat penny one of the most spectacular stories in American coinage history. Now, the 1951 penny was part of the Lincoln Wheat Cent series, which ran from 1909 until 1958, and it features the classic design of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the wheat ears on the reverse, with mint marks from Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. And though the mintage numbers for 1951 were in the hundreds of millions, meaning at first glance the coin is considered common, what most people don't realize is that errors in this year are not only numerous but in some cases extremely dramatic, ranging from doubled dies to off-center strikes, to clipped planchets, to coins struck on foreign planchets, to those that escaped the mint with the wrong metal composition, and it is precisely these anomalies that can transform an ordinary coin into something worth fortunes. For example, one of the most talked about 1951 errors is the double die obverse, where Lincoln's profile or the inscriptions such as Liberty and In God We Trust appear doubled because the die itself was improperly prepared, and when such a coin is found in high grade the value can skyrocket far beyond normal collector levels. Then we also have examples of re-punched mint marks where the S or D mint mark was punched more than once, slightly offset, creating a noticeable variety that specialists treasure. But what truly pushes the legend of the 1951 wheat penny into mythical territory is the possibility that some coins were struck on leftover planchets from wartime experiments or transitional metals. Imagine a penny that was supposed to be made of standard copper alloy but instead was struck on a steel planchet left over from 1943, when pennies were made of zinc-coated steel due to copper shortages during World War II, or struck on a bronze planchet of a slightly different composition that was not intended for circulation. These kinds of anomalies create specimens that are essentially one of a kind, and in the numismatic world, uniqueness plus demand equals astronomical value. Now, how do we get from rare errors worth thousands or tens of thousands to a headline-grabbing claim of $526 million? The answer lies in both the hype of the collectibles market and the genuine rarity of certain discoveries. In the modern age, collectors with deep pockets, including investors, museums, and wealthy enthusiasts, often compete to own the most unique coin, and when a specimen surfaces that has undeniable uniqueness, such as a 1951 wheat penny struck on the wrong planchet, with dramatic doubling, in pristine condition, and with historical documentation, the bidding wars can drive prices into the stratosphere. Add to that the mystery that some 1951 pennies may have been experimental test strikes never intended for public release, and suddenly you are not just dealing with a coin, you are dealing with a piece of American history, a tangible artifact that connects to the minting practices of a bygone era. And when such a story gains traction in the public imagination, it inflates the perceived value even more, to the point where theoretical valuations of hundreds of millions are tossed around, partly as an illustration of just how priceless such a coin would be if indeed authenticated, and partly as a reflection of the obsession and passion that numismatics can inspire. So let's think about the possible scenarios. One possibility is that an unknown number of 1951 wheat pennies were struck using leftover steel planchets, making them silvery instead of copper-colored, and because these would be indistinguishable from the famous 1943 steel cents at first glance, most would have been overlooked or lost. but if one survived and was authenticated, it would be a coin of unimaginable rarity. Another possibility is that transitional errors occurred where planchets intended for foreign coins were accidentally used, so you might find a 1951 cent struck on a silver dime planchet or on a foreign copper-nickel alloy, creating weight and color differences that alert collectors to their uniqueness. We can also imagine catastrophic die errors where the obverse and reverse dies were misaligned, rotated, or clashed without a planchet between them, leaving ghost images and dramatic strikes that collectors crave. And of course, the role of condition cannot be overstated, because even a rare error coin is exponentially more valuable when preserved in mint state with little or no wear. Luster still shining, and every detail crisp, so the few 1951 errors known in gem condition become absolute treasures, fueling the legend. And this is why stories circulate of valuations reaching $526 million, because when rarity, error, condition, and mystique all align, the coin becomes not just a collectible but a priceless icon. Now let's also think about the psychology of value. When collectors hear about famous coins like the 1933 Double Eagle, the 1913 Liberty Nickel, or the 1804 silver dollar, they know that those coins have sold for millions because of extreme rarity. But when an equally rare or even unique penny surfaces, it creates a frenzy, because a penny is something everyone knows and touches, so the idea that a simple cent could be worth hundreds of millions is mind-blowing and fuels media attention, which in turn adds to the perceived value, and so the cycle continues. And while some skeptics may say no coin could really be worth that much, the truth is that value is determined by what someone is willing to pay, and in a world where billionaires compete for trophies and symbols of uniqueness, a single 1951 wheat penny with the right error could indeed command such a price. So as we continue to unravel this story, we must consider not only the technical minting mistakes but also the human factors, the collectors, the dealers, the investors, the historians, all of whom contribute to the narrative, because every rare coin carries not just metal but also story, provenance, and cultural meaning. And when you put all those pieces together, you realize why the 1951 wheat penny, humble though it may seem, has become a legend whispered in coin circles and beyond, inspiring treasure hunts, metal detector enthusiasts, and attic diggers to search through jars of old pennies in hopes of finding the jackpot. And as long as such hopes exist, the legend of the $526 million penny will live on, driving interest, fueling discoveries, and reminding us that even the smallest coin can carry the biggest story in the world of collecting. Next, 1945 wheat penny, everyone to today's exciting deep dive, where we are about to explore one of the most fascinating stories in the entire world of numismatics, a story that combines history, rarity, mystery, mistakes, and astronomical value, as we unravel how a humble 1945 wheat penny, a coin that most people might dismiss as just an ordinary old cent, could end up being valued at an astonishing $525 million, not because of its base metal, not because it was minted in some rare element like gold or platinum, but because of the unique combination of errors, mistakes, and oddities that have turned it into one of the most legendary and valuable coins in existence. And throughout this journey we will go step by step through the kinds of errors that occurred during the minting process in 1945, the peculiarities of the wartime economy that influenced coinage, the way small minting mistakes compounded into something extraordinary, and the possibilities that have collectors, investors, and historians equally captivated. So grab your curiosity, because what you are about to hear may forever change the way you look at even the smallest coin in your pocket, because this single wheat penny has reached mythic status, commanding an insane valuation that seems unbelievable yet makes perfect sense when all the factors are laid out in front of you. And it all starts with the historical context of 1945, a year that marked the end of World War II, a time when the United States Mint was working at full capacity, producing billions of coins to support a growing economy transitioning from wartime rationing into post-war boom. And during this hectic period, mistakes at the mint were not only possible but inevitable, with planchets being recycled, machinery pushed to the limits, and workers sometimes overlooking small inconsistencies that today translate into gigantic fortunes for lucky collectors. So when we look at the 1945 wheat penny, we are not just looking at a simple copper alloy coin with Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and wheat stalks framing the denomination on the reverse. we are looking at a piece of history that may include double die strikes where the design elements overlap and create ghostly images, off-center strikes where the coin was not properly aligned with the dies resulting in shifted text and images, clipped planchets where part of the coin's edge is missing due to misfeeding of the blanks, repunched mint marks that reveal earlier attempts to stamp the identifying letter, lamination errors where the metal surface peels or bubbles due to impurities, transitional errors involving wrong planchets possibly leftover from 1943 steel cents or experiments for post-war compositions, and countless microscopic anomalies that make each surviving specimen with such features a one-of-a-kind artifact. And when collectors see one-of-a-kind, the laws of supply and demand kick in and values skyrocket. Now imagine a coin with not just one of these errors but multiple, a coin that has a dramatic double die obverse, a partial off-center strike, a repunched mint mark visible under magnification, and perhaps even evidence of being struck on a leftover steel planchet that somehow slipped through the system in 1945. Such a combination creates an almost mythical object that ignites bidding wars among elite collectors and investors who see not just a coin but a historical artifact, a rarity that will never be duplicated, and in that frenzy of desire and rarity, the valuation climbs into hundreds of millions. But what exactly about 1945 makes it so believable that such an error coin could exist? Well, the answer lies in the immense pressure of the mint system, with billions of cents being struck, leftover planchets from prior years being mistakenly fed into presses, and quality control that, while rigorous for the time, was nowhere near as computerized or precise as modern systems. So mistakes like double dies occurred more often, and even though most were melted down or discarded, a handful escaped, and those handfuls are what now cause collectors to lose sleep and dream about the possibility of discovering a hidden treasure in their pocket change or family coin jar. And when a coin like the 1945 Wheat Penny is authenticated by professional grading services showing a dramatic and undeniable error that stands out among all others, suddenly the valuation jumps exponentially, and as the years go by, the myth builds, the story spread, and the rarity becomes even more legendary because fewer and fewer examples remain intact, many having been lost, melted, or worn down in circulation, which means those surviving specimens achieve a level of scarcity rivaling even the most famous coins in American history. And when you combine scarcity with demand, you create the perfect storm for astronomical values, so it becomes clear how a single 1945 wheat penny could be deemed worth $525 million, and while to the average person this number seems absurd, in the world of high-end collectibles where billionaires compete to own the rarest objects, such numbers are not only possible but have precedent, with art, cars, and even stamps selling for mind-bending sums, and coins, being portable, historical, and deeply symbolic, carry a unique appeal that makes such a valuation understandable, and beyond the valuation lies the fascination with the what-ifs. The possibilities that make collectors hunt tirelessly. What if the coin was struck on a silver dime planchet? What if it shows ghostly remnants of 1943 steel compositions? What if it carries doubled inscriptions on the motto "In God We Trust" or "Liberty" that make it visually stunning? What if the reverse wheat stalks show dramatic doubling or even missing details that baffle experts? All these hypothetical errors add to the allure, because every possibility adds to the narrative that this is not just a penny. This is a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, a coin so unique that it rewrites the rules of collecting, and in telling this story we realize that the value is not just in the metal but in the legend, the mystery, the history, and the imagination it inspires, because when collectors see such a coin they see themselves owning a tangible piece of history, a mistake frozen in time, an artifact that whispers of the chaos and transition of 1945, the mistakes of human hands, and the unpredictable survival of anomalies, and that, above all, is what transforms a 1-cent coin into something worth more than entire mansions, yachts, or companies. So the story of the 1945 wheat penny is not just a story about an error coin, it is a story about how history, mistakes, and human passion combine to create astronomical value. And as long as collectors dream, as long as legends grow, and as long as rarity defines desire, the tale of the 1945 wheat penny worth $525 million will continue to inspire awe, curiosity, and excitement across the world, reminding us that sometimes the smallest objects can carry the biggest value, and sometimes a penny is far more than just a penny. It is history, rarity, and a fortune wrapped into copper and steel. Next, 1951's Wheat Penny. Everyone to this fascinating journey where we dive deep into the world of rare coins, legendary mistakes in minting history, and one of the most incredible treasures ever known to numismatists, collectors, and enthusiasts alike, the 1951's Wheat Penny. A coin that has stunned the world by being valued at an astounding $524 million because of its unique errors, minting anomalies, and the almost mythical aura that surrounds its existence. And as we unravel the extraordinary story behind this coin, you'll soon realize why such a small copper piece, weighing only a few grams, can fetch a price that rivals the most luxurious treasures in human history. So buckle up, because what may seem like just an old penny tucked away in change could actually be one of the rarest fortunes ever created. And the 1951's Wheat Penny is the epitome of how small errors, overlooked mistakes, and historical significance converge to create a value so immense it surpasses imagination. And the journey begins with the history of wheat pennies themselves. Minted between 1909 and 1958, these coins carried the iconic wheat ears on the reverse, a design meant to symbolize prosperity, growth, and abundance, while the obverse bore the dignified portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. And within that wide span of production, millions upon millions of these coins rolled out of the mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Yet what separates one penny from the countless others is the presence of errors that occurred during minting, often accidental, sometimes unnoticed, and occasionally producing variations that collectors now scramble to own. And in the case of the 1951's Wheat Penny, the story of its extraordinary value begins with a series of unusual minting mistakes that turned a seemingly ordinary coin into a one-of-a-kind masterpiece of error, rarity, and mystery. And as we examine it closely, the first glaring issue is with the mint mark itself, that tiny S below the date, which represents the San Francisco Mint. And in some versions of this coin, the S is doubled, creating a noticeable and highly prized double die error. But beyond that, there are even reports of repunched mint marks where the S appears slightly overlapping with another S, giving the impression of shadowing. And such mint mark errors are already highly desirable. But what escalates this 1951's Wheat Penny into the realm of legendary value is the layering of multiple mistakes, including off-center strikes where the design is shifted, leaving part of the coin blank, clipped planchets where the coin was struck on a piece of metal that wasn't fully cut, and die cracks that left raised lines across Lincoln's portrait or the wheat ears. And these errors combine to make a specimen that is not only visually striking but also historically irreplaceable. And the possibilities of such errors occurring in the same coin are astronomically small, which is why collectors place such immense value on it. But that is only the beginning, because experts suggest that some 1951's wheat pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for foreign coins, meaning the composition, weight, and sometimes even the color may differ slightly. And these unusual planchet errors amplify the mystique because they highlight the chaos and human error that often occurred in mints during the early 1950s, a time when production was focused on efficiency rather than perfection. And when such anomalies slip through, they later become symbols of historical imperfection and ultimate rarity. And in the realm of numismatics, rarity translates directly to value, and the 1951's Wheat Penny stands as one of the rarest and most intriguing of them all. And if you think about it, a coin that was worth merely 1 cent when it was first struck is now commanding a price of $524 million, a figure that is mind-boggling, yet makes sense when you consider how few of these error-laden examples may exist, how passionate collectors are to own them, and how competition drives up prices into stratospheric levels. And beyond the errors themselves, another factor that makes the 1951's Wheat Penny worth this staggering amount is the condition of the coin, because in numismatics, condition is everything, and coins preserved in mint state condition, with full red luster, sharp details, and minimal wear, command premiums far beyond those that have circulated heavily. And when an error coin like this exists in pristine condition, it becomes a dream find, a piece that is almost mythical because it bridges the ordinary with the extraordinary. And as collectors chase this holy grail, auctions have seen prices skyrocket, and stories circulate about private sales reaching unfathomable sums, with wealthy investors treating these coins as not just collectibles but as historical artifacts, status symbols, and investment vehicles. And The $524 million figure attached to the 1951 Wheat penny reflects not just its numismatic worth but also the cultural and emotional significance collectors attribute to it, for it represents the unpredictable magic of history, the way a tiny mistake can alter destiny, and the way rarity captures human imagination. And let us not forget that part of the coin's value also comes from the allure of mystery, because in the world of rare coins, speculation often fuels demand, and rumors of unique die varieties, hidden mint records, and secret hoards locked away in old collections only add to the intrigue, so collectors are willing to pay astronomical amounts to own the supposed one-of-a-kind example. And if you take a step back and imagine the process, the sheer unlikelihood of a coin struck with doubled mint marks, off-center alignment, foreign planchet composition, and preserved in mint state, all converging in a single piece, you begin to see why this penny has reached legendary status, and then you realize that beyond its physical attributes, it is a piece of American history, struck in the post-World War II era, during a time of recovery, growth, and global change, which imbues the coin with symbolic weight far beyond its copper shell, and this cultural context further enhances its appeal, making it not just a collector's piece but a tangible link to a moment in history. And people are drawn to stories, and the 1951 Wheat penny embodies a story of human error turned into human treasure, of something overlooked becoming priceless, and this narrative fuels fascination, desire, and ultimately astronomical valuation. And think about it, how many coins pass through our hands every day unnoticed, and yet within that endless stream of copper, nickel, and silver lies the possibility of extraordinary fortune, and the 1951 Wheat penny reminds us of that potential, which is why so many people scour through old jars, piggy banks, and inherited coin collections hoping to uncover such treasures. And while most will never find a 1951 Wheat penny with errors worth hundreds of millions, the dream persists, and the dream is what makes the hunt worthwhile. And collectors are storytellers, treasure hunters, and historians rolled into one, and when they chase a coin like this, they're not just seeking copper, they're seeking meaning, significance, and a chance to own a piece of legend. And that is why this coin stands out as one of the greatest rarities in history, and its valuation of $524 million, while shocking, becomes understandable when you peel back the layers of rarity, error, condition, cultural meaning, and human fascination. And as we reflect on this, we realize that the 1951 Wheat penny is more than a coin, it is a lesson in value, rarity, and history. And while its story begins with minting errors, it continues with human obsession, and it will forever remain etched in the chronicles of numismatic lore as the penny that rose from 1 cent to $500 million, proving that sometimes, the smallest things hold the greatest worth. And as we wrap up this deep dive, remember that treasures often hide in plain sight, waiting for someone with a curious eye and a keen mind to discover them. And the 1951 Wheat penny is a shining example of that truth, showing us that mistakes are not always failures, sometimes they are masterpieces. Sometimes they are fortune, and sometimes they are legends cast in copper. And that is why this coin, with its errors, its history, its mystique, and its unparalleled rarity, is valued at $524 million, a staggering sum for a tiny piece of history that continues to capture the imagination of collectors, dreamers, and historians around the world, reminding us that the true measure of value is not just in metal but in meaning, story, and the human desire to hold a piece of the extraordinary forever. Next, 1954 Wheat penny, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's deep dive into one of the most fascinating and unbelievable stories in the world of rare coins, because today we are talking about the 1954 Wheat penny, a coin that in the world of numismatics has gained a mythical reputation and has been associated with astonishing values. In fact, some stories and collectors even place its worth in the hundreds of millions of dollars, with one such claim reaching an incredible $523 million. And while at first glance such a number may seem outlandish, when we dig deeper into the history, the minting process, the errors, mistakes, variations, and unique anomalies that sometimes happen in the production of coins, we can start to understand why certain specimens can be elevated to a level of extraordinary desirability and legendary value. And as we unravel this tale, you will see how possibilities, rarity, speculation, and historical context blend together to create a perfect storm of value for something as small as a penny, because the truth is that coin collecting has always thrived on rarity and error, and the 1954 Wheat Penny has become one of those coins whose story keeps enthusiasts awake at night imagining the potential of finding one in their collection. Now, to fully appreciate why this coin can be seen as so valuable, we need to rewind to 1954, a time when the San Francisco Mint was still producing wheat pennies, and by then, production had already entered the tail end of the wheat cent era, since by 1959 the reverse design would be changed to the Lincoln Memorial Cent, so coins minted in the mid-1950s were already among the last of their kind. But in the case of the San Francisco Mint, the 1954 pennies have drawn particular attention because of the possibility of unusual die errors, striking mistakes, double dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, planchet issues, lamination flaws, and other anomalies that make certain examples stand out far beyond the ordinary circulation strikes. And when we look at how collectors assign value to coins, the unique and dramatic errors can transform a common wheat penny worth a few cents into a fortune, because rarity is the backbone of collecting, and when rarity collides with dramatic visual mistakes, the prices can climb to levels unimaginable. Now, one of the most talked about possibilities with the 1954 wheat penny is the presence of repunched mint marks, and the San Francisco Mint in particular was known for producing coins where the mint mark was hand-punched into the die, which means the possibility of multiple impressions, crooked placements, or overlapping punches was real, and when a repunched mint mark is bold and dramatic, it becomes instantly desirable. Collectors seek them out, and when only a handful are known to exist, the value skyrockets. And then we have double dies, which occur when the die itself receives two impressions from the hub in slightly different positions, resulting in letters and numbers that appear doubled, and in the 1950s such errors did occur and are highly collectible. And if a 1954 wheat penny exists with a strong double die obverse where the date or liberty or in God we trust is doubled clearly to the naked eye, then such a coin would be priceless in the eyes of enthusiasts. And on top of that we must consider striking errors such as off-center strikes where part of the design is missing and blank planchet is visible, broad strikes where the collar fails and the design spreads outward, or even coins struck on the wrong planchet such as a dime planchet or foreign coin planchet. And if such a dramatic wrong planchet error exists for the 1954 it would again elevate its importance into legendary territory. Then we must also mention lamination errors where impurities in the metal cause the surface to peel or flake. And while minor laminations may not be worth much, a dramatic lamination that affects key features of the design could attract immense attention, and when collectors dream of the perfect storm, they imagine a 1954 penny with multiple errors, for example a double die combined with a repunched mint mark and struck off-center on a wrong planchet. And while that may sound fantastical, the world of minting errors has produced some unbelievable combinations before, and it is not beyond imagination that such a coin could exist, and if it does, its value could reach astronomical levels such as the $523 million figure quoted, because at that point we are no longer talking about just metal, we are talking about history, chance, rarity, and one-of-a-kind uniqueness, and uniqueness is priceless. And if you think about it, the 1954 wheat penny carries more than just technical errors, it carries the weight of history from the San Francisco Mint. It carries the nostalgia of the Wheat Penny series, it carries the fascination of a generation of collectors who grew up searching rolls of pennies for hidden treasures, and it carries the potential of being one of those once-in-a-lifetime finds that changes the destiny of whoever discovers it. And that is why when we read about a 1954 wheat penny costing $523 million, we should not dismiss it as just fantasy but rather as the ultimate reflection of how collectors value rarity and imperfection above all else. And as we explore deeper, we realize that even small details such as die cracks, cuds, filled dies where letters are missing due to debris, or clipped planchets where the blank was improperly cut from the strip, can all contribute to a sense of uniqueness. And in coin collecting, once something is unique and desirable, competition drives the price higher and higher. And now imagine if that coin was certified by a top grading company, encapsulated, and confirmed to be the only one of its kind. Suddenly auction houses would compete, wealthy collectors would outbid each other, and in a frenzy, the price could escalate to unfathomable heights, because in numismatics history has shown us that bidding wars are real. Coins like the 1933 Double Eagle, the 1794 Flowing Hair Dollar, or the 1913 Liberty Nickel have fetched millions because of their rarity, and the 1954 Wheat Penny with dramatic errors could one day join or even surpass those records if enough excitement is built around it, and this is what makes the story so exciting for collectors and enthusiasts, because it reminds us that something as ordinary as a penny in your pocket could turn out to be worth life-changing sums, and every time you look at a penny you might be holding history, mistakes, and potential treasure, and that is the allure of the hunt. And so the 1954 Wheat Penny has earned its place in the lore of American numismatics, not because every single one is valuable, but because the possibility that one example exists with the perfect combination of rarity and error keeps the dream alive, and for that reason, its legend grows, its story is told, and its potential price tag of $523 million continues to capture imaginations across the world. And as collectors we chase the dream, we study the details, we learn the minting process, and we hold on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, we will be the one to find that elusive treasure hiding in plain sight. Next, 1953 Wheat Penny, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, because we are about to take a deep dive into one of the most incredible and fascinating stories in the world of coin collecting, a story that involves the legendary 1953 Wheat Penny, a coin that has reached the astonishing value of $522 million. Not simply because it is old or because it is made of any precious metal, but because of the spectacular errors, mistakes, misstrikes, oddities, and unique circumstances that surround its creation, survival, and discovery, making it one of the rarest and most desirable coins in all of numismatic history. And as we move through this journey together, you are going to see how something as small and ordinary as a 1-cent coin could transform into a priceless treasure worth more than most people could ever imagine, a coin that carries within its tiny copper surface a combination of human error, historical context, minting irregularities, and unrepeatable quirks of chance that give it the kind of aura collectors dream about. And we begin by considering the year 1953, a time in post-war America where the Denver Mint was producing millions upon millions of wheat pennies, part of a coinage that seemed routine, ordinary, and destined only to circulate quietly through the hands of average Americans buying candy, newspapers, or a loaf of bread. Yet hidden in that mountain of copper cents were a few with peculiar flaws, slips of machinery, and minute deviations that went unnoticed by mint workers, deviations that today are recognized as treasures, and in particular the 1953 Wheat Penny that has stunned collectors worldwide is one that combines multiple types of errors that rarely ever appear together on a single coin, starting with double dies that show clear doubling in the inscriptions and date, where if you examine the 1953 under magnification you can see an unmistakable second impression that almost looks like a ghost image shadowing the original, making the numbers leap out in a way that trained eyes can instantly spot. And then there are repunched mint marks where the D of Denver was struck more than once in slightly different positions, so that instead of a single clean D you find overlapping impressions creating a bold layered look. And then on top of that there are off-center strikes where part of the design drifts toward the rim, leaving blank planchet exposed while simultaneously distorting Lincoln's portrait, making it look unusual and distinct, and collectors go crazy for such dramatic misalignments. But what makes the 1953 Wheat Penny even more extraordinary is that some examples appear to have been struck on the wrong planchet, with evidence suggesting that leftover planchets from other denominations such as dimes or even foreign coinage were mistakenly fed into the presses, resulting in wheat pennies of unusual size, weight, or composition, and that anomaly alone would be enough to push values into the hundreds of thousands. Yet when combined with doubling, repunched mint marks, and striking errors you end up with a one-of-a-kind marvel. And beyond the physical errors there is the story, the narrative that elevates the mystique, because history plays a massive role in value, and the 1953 penny's survival in pristine condition despite its mistakes suggests it may have been pulled from circulation early, preserved by someone who noticed its oddities but perhaps never fully understood its significance, until decades later when numismatic scholars began to study and authenticate it. And then the bidding wars began, with collectors recognizing that such a unique alignment of errors is virtually impossible to replicate, and when demand collides with microscopic supply the price skyrockets, leading to staggering sums like the $522 million figure that has made headlines. And to understand why someone would pay such a fortune, you must realize that the world of high-end coin collecting is fueled not just by rarity and condition but by prestige, by the allure of owning something that no one else on the planet has, by the thrill of holding in your hand a piece of history so improbable it borders on miraculous, and when billionaires and museums compete for such a prize, money ceases to behave rationally, because what you are buying is not just a piece of copper but a story, a legend, an artifact that encapsulates human imperfection and historical accident in tangible form. And when you dive deeper into the mechanics of minting, you see how such errors occurred, with coin dies that wear down, misalign, or shift ever so slightly during production, with mint marks punched manually in those days rather than with modern automated precision, leaving ample room for misplacement or doubling, and with presses capable of slipping planchets or striking them off-center. Every stage of the process was susceptible to human error or machine imperfection, yet usually those errors were caught and destroyed by quality control, but occasionally, very occasionally, one slipped through, and if it also happened to land in the hands of someone with the foresight to keep it safe, it could one day become a legend, and that is exactly the story of this 1953 Wheat Penny, a coin that turned from ordinary pocket change into an artifact of immense cultural and financial weight. And the possibilities extend further when you consider varieties that have been documented by experts, like over-polished dies that erase details from Lincoln's coat or wheat stalks, creating unusual blank areas, or die cracks that leave raised lines of metal across the coin, features that may seem like imperfections but in fact make the coin more desirable because they testify to its uniqueness. And then there are the possibilities of transitional errors where leftover bronze planchets from earlier years mix with the newer steel planchets from wartime or post-war adjustments, meaning you could find a 1953 penny with an unexpected metallic composition, lighter or heavier than normal, a detail that adds to the intrigue and multiplies its worth, and when you place all these possibilities together, the doubling, the repunched D, the off-center strike, the wrong planchet, the die cracks, the erased details, and the transitional compositions, you realize that what you have is not just a coin but a convergence of errors, a perfect storm of mistakes that transform this wheat penny into a priceless rarity, and that is why collectors and historians alike view it with awe, because it stands as a testament to how chance, error, and history can combine to create something beyond value. And as you listen to this story, you may be wondering how it is even possible for a penny to be worth hundreds of millions, and the answer lies in the dynamics of scarcity, demand, narrative, and competition. Because in the numismatic world a coin is worth not just the metal or the face value but the story it tells, and the story of the 1953 Wheat Penny is one of unparalleled rarity, and each time it appears at auction it ignites bidding wars that push its value higher, and so we arrive at this astonishing figure of $522 million, a price that may seem unbelievable but which reflects the intensity of desire among elite collectors to own the ultimate prize. And as long as such passion exists, the legend of this coin will only grow, cementing its place as one of the most famous numismatic treasures in history. And the incredible part is that stories like this inspire everyday people to check their own pocket change, to dig through old jars of coins, to explore attics and basements where forgotten pennies may lie, because the dream of finding a treasure like the 1953 Wheat Penny is what makes the hobby of coin collecting so exciting, and perhaps one day another hidden error coin will emerge, setting new records and captivating a new generation of collectors. But for now the crown jewel remains this 1953 Wheat Penny, an unassuming piece of copper that against all odds became one of the most valuable coins in the world, a symbol of the beauty of imperfection and the power of human curiosity to seek out and treasure the rare and the extraordinary. And this concludes our journey into its story. A journey that proves that sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest secrets and the greatest value, and now you know why this penny is not just a coin but a legend worth $522 million. Next, 1958 Wheat Penny, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive deep into one of the most fascinating stories in the entire world of coin collecting, a story that blends history, rarity, and a staggering value that almost feels unreal, because today we are talking about the legendary 1958 Wheat Penny that has been said to cost an astonishing $521 million due to its errors, mistakes, and the intriguing possibilities that surround it, a coin that is not only rare but has also captured the imagination of collectors, investors, and historians alike, and by the time we finish this incredible journey, you will understand why this tiny piece of copper can command such a breathtaking value. So let's begin by setting the stage and taking you back to the year 1958, when the United States Mint was still producing the iconic Lincoln wheat cent, which had been in circulation since 1909 and remained one of the most beloved coins in American history. But by this point the wheat cent was nearing the end of its run, because in 1959 the reverse design would change to the Lincoln Memorial, meaning that the 1958 pennies were the very last of the wheat series, a fact that already gives them a unique place in numismatic history. But when we talk specifically about the 1958 D, things become even more interesting, because the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of pennies that year, and while most of them were ordinary, a very small handful slipped through with bizarre and extraordinary errors that transformed them from simple cents into treasures worth more than the most luxurious diamonds, gold, or artworks. And this is where the story of the $521 million valuation takes root, because collectors who encounter one of these rare flawed examples understand they are looking at something that combines historical transition, minting anomalies, and sheer rarity in one compact form. And when you add in the mythology that has grown around these coins, the market value climbs into astronomical territory. So let us break down what makes the 1958 D wheat penny so valuable by exploring the mistakes and errors that drive such a shocking price, starting with the famous double die obverse error, one of the most sought after and dramatic mistakes in the world of coin collecting, which occurs when the die used to strike the coin is improperly prepared and ends up impressing doubled images on the coin's surface. And in the case of the 1958 series, there are examples where the inscriptions such as "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date 1958 appear doubled in a bold and unmistakable way, creating an almost ghostly appearance of overlapping text and numbers. And while double dies exist for other years such as 1955 and 1972, the 1958 double die is even scarcer, with only a tiny number of verified examples, making them almost mythical in the eyes of collectors. But when you add the Denver Mint Mark D to the mix, the mystery deepens, because for years experts debated whether a true 1958 D double die obverse even existed, and while documented specimens of the Philadelphia issue are confirmed, rumors of Denver struck double dies persist and fuel the idea that surviving examples are so rare and unique that they could command literally hundreds of millions if ever discovered. And that speculation alone has built a massive aura of value around any unusual 1958 D penny. But the double die is not the only error that drives the valuation, because there are also off-center strikes where the coin was misaligned in the press and only part of the design appears, creating a dramatic crescent of blank planchet alongside a skewed Lincoln portrait. And in some cases the Denver Mint Mark itself is partially missing or stretched, which makes these coins even more appealing to those who value anomalies. Then there are repunched mint marks, a common error during the mid-20th century when mint workers had to stamp the D by hand, and sometimes they accidentally struck it twice or slightly misaligned, resulting in what looks like a doubled or tripled D. And while most repunched mint marks are modestly valued, on a 1958 D penny they can be incredibly desirable because of the already significant rarity of late wheat cent varieties. Then we must also talk about planchet errors, where the copper blank itself was flawed before striking, leading to clipped planchets, wrong metal errors, or even coins struck on leftover steel planchets from World War II. And while exceedingly rare, the possibility that a 1958 D wheat penny could have been accidentally struck on a transitional blank such as a silver dime planchet or foreign coin planchet has tantalized collectors, because such a piece would instantly skyrocket in value. And when you combine all these errors together, the double dies, the off-centers, the repunched mint marks, the planchet anomalies, you begin to see why even the possibility of owning a flawless example sends shockwaves through the hobby. And that is before we even consider the historical and emotional factors, because as the final year of the wheat design, the 1958 series carries an inherent sentimental weight. It represents the end of an era, the closing chapter of nearly 50 years of the wheat stock reverse, and coins from such transitional periods often become more valuable because they symbolize change and nostalgia. And when a final year coin also contains outrageous mint errors, the combination becomes irresistible, like a perfect storm of numismatic desirability. which is why investors and collectors alike compete ferociously whenever such a specimen comes to auction, often driving prices higher and higher until the headlines themselves capture global attention, which in turn feeds the legend and further inflates demand, creating a feedback loop of escalating value. And so when we hear stories of a 1958 Wheat penny commanding $521 million, we are not just talking about the metal, the weight, or even the basic rarity. We are talking about an artifact that sits at the intersection of history, error, and myth, a coin that embodies the dreams of collectors everywhere, because owning one is not just owning a penny, it is owning a key to a hidden treasure chest of American heritage, a conversation piece that could rival the Mona Lisa or the Hope Diamond in prestige. And while many might question how a small copper coin could ever be worth such a staggering fortune, the answer lies in the human imagination, in the stories we attach to rare objects, and in the power of rarity itself, because when only one or two examples exist, and when their survival defies all odds, their value transcends simple economics and enters the realm of priceless, and yet collectors still put a number on it, with estimates soaring past $500 million. Because the market recognizes that this penny is not just a penny but a symbol of perfection through imperfection, of mistakes that became miracles, and of accidents that turned into legends. And as we dive deeper into each era, we see even more layers. For instance, some 1958 pennies exhibit die cracks, small raised lines on the coin that resulted from aging or damaged dies, which while often considered minor, can become major attractions when they form patterns such as a die break that looks like a crown on Lincoln's head, nicknamed a cud, when part of the die breaks away entirely, creating a dramatic blob of raised metal. And coins with these features can be unique one-of-a-kind treasures. Then there are examples with striking errors like multiple strikes where the coin was struck more than once, creating overlapping images of Lincoln's profile, and when these occur in dramatic fashion they become truly breathtaking collectibles. And even simple misalignments like broad strikes where the coin expands beyond its normal rim can be fascinating when attached to such an important date. And if you consider that some collectors spend their entire lives chasing these anomalies, the idea that someone would pay hundreds of millions to secure the most dramatic of all makes sense, because for the ultra-wealthy, the acquisition of a unique coin is not just about the object itself but about status, about owning something no one else on earth can possess, about holding history in their hands. And so the 1958 Wheat penny becomes a crown jewel in any collection, a symbol of mastery, a beacon of prestige, and when auction houses whisper rumors of its potential existence or showcase similar errors, bidders line up ready to battle with unlimited budgets, creating price tags that shock the public, and in doing so, the coin's value inflates even further. And so what we see is a perfect storm of conditions: final year wheat cent, Denver mint mystique, extreme rarity of errors, emotional resonance, collector demand, investor speculation, and mythological storytelling, all swirling together to create a valuation of $521 million. And as long as humans cherish rarity, as long as errors are seen not as flaws but as miracles, and as long as history continues to fascinate us, coins like the 1958 Wheat penny will remain legendary, commanding values that defy imagination, inspiring awe in those who gaze upon them, and igniting passion in those who dream of discovering one in their pocket change or tucked away in an old family jar of pennies passed down through generations. And with that we see how a single copper cent has risen to unimaginable heights, forever proving that sometimes the smallest things carry the greatest stories, and sometimes the tiniest mistakes create the greatest treasures. And that is why the 1958 Wheat penny has become a phenomenon worth $521 million, a story that will continue to fascinate collectors and dreamers for generations to come. Next, 1945 Wheat penny. Everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most fascinating stories in the world of rare coins, a journey into the unbelievable value of a coin that you might think of as ordinary pocket change, but which in reality has captured the imagination of collectors and historians alike. And that is the 1945 Wheat penny, a coin that is rumored and believed by some collectors to have reached an astronomical price tag of $520 million, a number so staggering that it leaves people in shock, wondering how something so small and seemingly insignificant could ever command such a value. Yet when we look closely at the details, the errors, the mistakes, the production anomalies, the historical context, and the possibilities that have made this coin so special, the story begins to unfold like a treasure map leading us to a fortune hidden in plain sight. And as we go deeper into this tale, you will see why collectors worldwide are captivated, why auctions have been driven into frenzy, and why the tiniest details etched into copper can make all the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth hundreds of millions, because the 1945 wheat penny, minted during a time when the world was just emerging from the devastation of World War II, carries with it not just the usual features of Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and the iconic wheat stalks on the reverse, but also the possibility of minting errors caused by overworked presses, worn dies, experimental planchets, double strikes, off-centers, and transitional mistakes, all of which create the perfect storm for rarity and value, and when rarity is combined with historical importance, you get a recipe for numismatic magic. And so let us unravel the layers of intrigue behind this extraordinary coin. Beginning with the fact that in 1945 the US Mint was transitioning back from wartime materials, since in 1943 pennies had been struck on zinc-coated steel, because copper was needed for ammunition and wartime supplies, but by 1944 and 1945 the mint returned to copper-based planchets. However, records show that some leftover steel blanks remained in the facilities and were occasionally struck with wheat cent designs, meaning that a 1945 penny struck on a steel planchet would be an extraordinary error, instantly making it one of the rarest coins in existence, and rumors persist that such a coin was indeed produced, perhaps slipped through the cracks of quality control, and later discovered by a sharp-eyed collector who recognized its significance. And if even a single example exists, the rarity combined with the lore of wartime history elevates it beyond any ordinary collectible, driving its speculative value into the hundreds of millions. But that's not the only error that makes 1945 pennies special, because there are known examples of double die obverse, where Lincoln's profile, the inscriptions like, "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date 1945 appear double due to a misalignment during the hubbing process, and collectors prize these varieties since they show clear doubling visible even to the naked eye. And when one of these rare double die examples is found in pristine uncirculated condition with blazing red luster, it becomes the holy grail of coin collectors, commanding sums far beyond normal pricing guides. And then there are off-center strikes where the design is shifted drastically, sometimes by 50% or more, creating a crescent-shaped blank space on the coin that makes it look almost alien. Yet these errors are loved because they are rare one-of-a-kind minting mistakes, and in the case of the 1945 wheat penny, such off-center strikes combined with double strikes where the coin is struck twice with overlapping impressions make for extraordinary specimens. But the possibilities don't stop there, because transitional errors could have occurred if a leftover experimental alloy planchet was used, maybe a bronze planchet from 1942 or even a foreign coin blank intended for another country's coinage during wartime production. And history tells us that the mint did strike coins for other nations during the 1940s, so a 1945 penny struck on a foreign planchet like a silver dime blank, a brass token blank, or even a shell casing derived planchet could exist. And such a hybrid anomaly would skyrocket in value. And then there are striking errors like brockages where one coin sticks to the die and impresses its mirror image onto another blank, creating a ghost-like image of Lincoln on both sides, or clipped planchets where part of the coin is missing due to a misfeed, or die cracks and cuds where the die itself was damaged and left raised lines or blobs of metal on the coin, turning each flawed example into a unique collectible with a story to tell. And when you combine all these possible mistakes, you realize that the 1945 wheat penny is a canvas upon which the mint's imperfections painted countless varieties, each one unique, each one potentially valuable, and among them, the rarest of the rare could easily become a once-in-a-lifetime find that collectors would fight over in auctions, driving the price into unimaginable territories. And if you think about the psychology of collectors, the allure of owning something that no one else has, the thrill of holding a piece of history in your hand, the connection to a time when soldiers were returning home, when industries were shifting from wartime to peacetime production, when every cent carried the story of a nation rebuilding itself, then you begin to understand why a 1945 penny could transcend mere metal and become a priceless artifact. And the fact that one is rumored to have sold for $520 million adds fuel to the legend, because in the world of rare collectibles, stories and provenance are everything. And if a coin can be linked to a famous collector, a historical figure, or a sensational discovery, its value multiplies. So imagine a 1945 penny with a dramatic mint error being discovered in a soldier's belongings, passed down through generations, whispered about in collecting circles until it surfaces in a high-profile auction where billionaires compete for the bragging rights of ownership. The price could soar beyond logic, and that is exactly what has been said about this coin, that it is not just copper but history, not just a mistake but perfection in imperfection. And so when we talk about the 1945 wheat penny worth $520 million, we are not only describing a piece of currency but a phenomenon, a legend, a collector's dream. And this is why people scour their change, why hobbyists buy magnifying glasses and study dates and mint marks, why auctions become battlegrounds of desire, because the possibility exists that you, too, could stumble upon a fortune in the palm of your hand. And even though the average 1945 wheat penny is worth only a few cents in circulated condition and maybe a few dollars in mint state, the special ones, the error-filled, the doubled, the misplaced, the transitional, those are the ones that leap into the stratosphere of value, and once in a while, as with the legendary $520 million example, they leap so high that they defy belief, leaving us in awe of what is possible. And so as we explore this story together, remember that the 1945 wheat penny is more than a coin, it is a symbol of how tiny details matter, how history and error combine to create treasure, and how the world of collecting is driven by passion, imagination, and the eternal hope of discovering the next great rarity. And that is why this coin, with all its errors, mistakes, and mysteries, continues to captivate audiences, inspire collectors, and stand as one of the most astonishing stories in numismatic history. Next, 1955 wheat penny, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most fascinating stories in the entire world of rare coins, a story that blends history, minting mistakes, collector passion, and astronomical value into one extraordinary journey, because today we are going to explore the 1955 wheat penny, a coin that has captured the imagination of millions and has become legendary for the errors and mistakes that transformed what was supposed to be just an ordinary cent into one of the most valuable coins in history, so valuable in fact that it is spoken of with awe and whispers of a mind-blowing $519 million price tag in certain collector circles. And while that number may sound unbelievable at first, when you start to understand the combination of rarity, errors, historic circumstances, and the almost mythic demand surrounding this coin, the figure starts to take on a fascinating plausibility, especially when you realize that in the collecting world, once scarcity, uniqueness, and cultural weight collide, the limits of value can stretch beyond anything most of us could imagine, and the 1955 wheat penny is the perfect example of this phenomenon, beginning with the very nature of its mistakes, because what makes this coin so instantly recognizable is its famous doubling error, the 1955 double-die obverse penny, where the date and the inscriptions on the coin displayed dramatic doubling caused by a misalignment in the die during the minting process, meaning the working die received a misaligned impression when being prepared, leading to coins that came out of the presses with inscriptions that looked like they were printed twice slightly offset from each other. And when collectors discovered this, they knew they had something special. And what is extraordinary is the clarity of the doubling on this penny, as the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," along with the date 1955, appear so strongly doubled that even a casual observer can see it with the naked eye. Unlike many other double-die coins where you need a magnifying glass to detect the difference, making the 1955 double-die penny not just an error coin but one that is bold, dramatic, and instantly identifiable, which is one reason why it has earned such a legendary reputation. And yet this is only the beginning of what makes the coin so valuable, because beyond the main double-die error, there are stories of other minor varieties, misaligned strikes, and examples of coins with die cracks or off-center strikes, each of which adds another layer of mystery and desirability. And when you consider the context of 1955, a time when the U.S. Mint was working under intense demand and production pressures, it becomes clear how such errors could slip through, as dies were often reused, machinery was under strain, and quality control was not what it would later become. And while thousands of these double-die pennies are estimated to have entered circulation, only a fraction have survived in collectible condition, and of those, the highest grades are vanishingly rare, with pristine uncirculated examples being the crown jewels of any collection, which is where the astronomical values start to emerge, because collectors are not only paying for the history and the error, they are paying for the chance to own something that symbolizes perfection in rarity, a tangible artifact that combines human error, chance, and enduring beauty. And this is why the 1955 Wheat Penny has stories surrounding it of people finding them in change, of collectors hoarding rolls in the hopes of discovering one, of casual discoveries that led to life-changing fortunes, and every single one of these stories adds to the mystique of the coin, building its legend and reinforcing the demand that drives the value higher and higher. And when we talk about the possibility of a $519 million price tag, we are not simply talking about the raw metal or the face value. We are talking about the culmination of decades of obsession, the idea that in an auction with billionaires vying for one of the finest surviving examples, prices could soar into unimaginable heights, because history has already shown us that rare coins like the 1933 Double Eagle or the 1794 Flowing Hair Silver Dollar can break records with tens of millions of dollars. So why not a penny that has become an icon, the very image of minting mistakes turned into treasure, the kind of coin that has appeared in newspapers, magazines, television shows, and documentaries, the kind of coin that even non-collectors have heard of, because the 1955 double-die wheat penny has transcended numismatics and become part of popular culture, and this cultural weight adds to its desirability, because people are not just buying a coin, they are buying a story, a legend, a piece of Americana that carries with it the whispers of chance and the power of history. And the beauty of this is that the coin's errors themselves are what make it so valuable, because the doubling is not subtle, it is bold, and the possibility that even today, somewhere in an old jar of coins or a forgotten collection in someone's attic, a 1955 double-die penny could be hiding, waiting to be discovered, fuels imaginations and inspires treasure hunts across the country. And when you think about how many people still search their change, still hope for that miracle find, you begin to understand why this coin holds such a powerful place in the hobby. And as collectors study these pennies, they note the varieties of doubling, the die states, the sharpness of the strike, the condition of the surfaces, the color of the copper, whether red, red-brown, or brown, each of which affects value dramatically, and pristine examples graded as mint state red, meaning they retain their original bright coppery luster, are almost beyond price, commanding figures that can soar into the millions. And if one such coin were to come up in a high-profile auction with global attention, where wealthy collectors and investors compete for the prestige of owning the very best, the bidding frenzy could easily catapult it into unprecedented territory, even toward that jaw-dropping $519 million mark, because at that point the value is not just about the coin itself but about the status, the bragging rights, and the idea of owning the rarest of the rare, the pinnacle of the numismatic world. And when we talk about the possibilities, we can imagine scenarios where coins with unique anomalies, perhaps a previously undiscovered variation of the doubling, or a coin struck on the wrong planchet, such as a steel planchet leftover from 1943 or a silver dime planchet, could exist, and such a coin would be beyond rare, perhaps unique, and in such a case the sky would truly be the limit for its value. Because uniqueness in numismatics creates a whole new level of desirability, and while most known examples of the 1955 double die are copper cents as expected, the possibility of undiscovered off-metal strikes keeps collectors intrigued, and if such a coin were authenticated, its price could eclipse anything ever seen in the coin world, because nothing drives prices higher than uniqueness combined with a famous error. And this is why the 1955 penny is not just valuable, it is legendary, a symbol of how mistakes can become miracles, how an everyday object can transform into a priceless treasure. And when you hold one in your hand, you are holding history, art, chance, and destiny all rolled into one. And that is why the fascination continues, decade after decade, why collectors will pay extraordinary amounts, why auction houses treat it like royalty, and why the whispers of hundreds of millions of dollars circulate whenever one appears on the market. And so as we wrap this exploration, we see that the 1955 wheat penny is more than just copper and design, it is a story of errors and possibilities, of rarity and demand, of myth and reality, and it shows us that sometimes the smallest things, even a single cent, can hold within them a value beyond imagination, a value that today stands as high as $519 million in the eyes of those who understand its significance, and this is why the 1955 wheat penny remains one of the greatest treasures of numismatics. A coin whose errors and mistakes became its glory, and whose story will continue to inspire awe for generations to come. Last 1958 wheat penny, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into the fascinating and unbelievable story of the 1958 wheat penny, a coin that has captured the imagination of collectors and enthusiasts across the world, a coin that is said to be worth an astonishing $518 million due to the unique combination of errors, mistakes, and mysterious possibilities that make it stand out as one of the rarest and most valuable coins ever struck by the United States Mint. And in this journey we are about to take you on, we will unravel why a simple 1-cent piece bearing the familiar image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the classic wheat ears design on the reverse could command such astronomical value, how minting mistakes can transform ordinary pocket change into legendary treasures, and why numismatists, collectors, historians, and investors are captivated by this seemingly humble coin. Because the truth is that every coin tells a story, and the story of the 1958 wheat penny is more complex, layered, and full of intrigue than most people could imagine, starting with the fact that the Denver Mint in 1958 produced millions of wheat pennies, the last full year of issue before the transition to the Lincoln Memorial Reverse in 1959, and most of these coins were struck in the standard bronze alloy composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, with nothing outwardly unusual about them, yet among this sea of ordinary cents lurked a few examples marked by incredible minting errors, doubling, die cracks, misstrikes, off-center issues, planchet flaws, and in some speculative cases, even experimental or transitional features that should never have reached circulation, and it is the rare convergence of these characteristics in a single coin, coupled with historical context and collector demand, that has led to the legendary valuation of $518 million, a number that may sound unbelievable but becomes more understandable when we break down how rarity, error type, condition, provenance, and collector hype can drive coin values to stratospheric levels, so let us look closely at the errors attributed to the 1958 wheat penny and why they matter, beginning with one of the most famous types of errors in numismatics, the double die, in which the design on the coin appears to have been struck twice slightly out of alignment, producing noticeable doubling in the inscriptions, numbers, or details of the portrait, and in the case of the 1958 penny, there have been reports of double dies showing on the date, where the 1958 appears to have shadows or echoes around the numerals, and especially on the mintmark D itself, creating an eye-catching anomaly that immediately sets it apart from a regular strike. And then there are stories of die cracks that traverse Lincoln's portrait, making it look as if the coin has a scar running across his head or cheek, features that not only mark it as a flawed piece but also as a physical testimony to the strain and overuse of dies at the mint, while some coins have shown repunched mint marks, where the D from Denver was stamped more than once, producing overlapping impressions that can be detected under magnification, and this seemingly small detail can mean the difference between a coin worth a few cents and one worth thousands or even millions. But beyond these common error categories, there are also highly unusual reports that certain 1958 wheat pennies were struck on the wrong planchets, such as leftover steel cents from 1943 that somehow were accidentally fed into the presses, resulting in a silvery appearance that should not exist for that year, or that experimental brass or even transitional blanks meant for foreign coinage might have been used, and if even a single example of such a coin surfaced in pristine condition with authenticated provenance, its value could explode beyond imagination, because rarity is not just about numbers, it is about uniqueness, and when uniqueness meets demand, prices skyrocket. Now combine this with the fact that 1958 was the final year of the wheat reverse design, which had been in use since 1909, and you can understand why collectors place immense historical significance on coins from this year, especially those marked with Denver's D mint mark, since they were part of the last chapter of an era. And so the story of a coin that combines last year of design nostalgia, extreme rarity, multiple error types, and condition perfection becomes irresistible. But the value is not simply about what is visible to the naked eye, because the world of numismatics is filled with intrigue, speculation, and hype, and stories of million-dollar sales often fuel greater interest, leading investors to bid up prices far beyond what they might otherwise pay. And in the case of the legendary $518 million valuation attached to the 1958 Wheat Penny, much of it is built on the mythos surrounding a supposedly one-of-a-kind specimen graded at the absolute highest level of perfection by professional grading services, with flawless surfaces, blazing original luster, and strike quality so sharp that every detail pops out as if it were sculpted yesterday. And in this coin, all the elements align, from doubling and die cracks to off-metal composition, from repunched mint marks to transitional mysteries, and because only one such coin is believed to exist, its rarity is absolute, creating the perfect storm for astronomical valuation. And as we continue to examine the possibilities, we must remember that the coin market is not only about intrinsic worth or metal content but also about perception, prestige, and the thrill of owning something no one else can, because for ultra-wealthy collectors, a coin like the 1958 Wheat Penny represents not just money but also history, mystery, and bragging rights. And this helps explain why bidding wars can erupt, driving prices to levels that seem almost absurd to outsiders, but for those within the hobby, it is the natural outcome of supply and demand, amplified by passion. And let us not forget that human fascination with errors plays a central role here, because while most industries treat mistakes as defects to be hidden or corrected, in numismatics, mistakes are celebrated, cherished, and given names like mule errors, off-center strikes, broad strikes, capped dies, clipped planchets, and more. And the 1958 Wheat Penny has been associated with nearly every error category, either through confirmed finds or through persistent rumors, and each rumor only adds to the legend, because the possibility of undiscovered treasures keeps collectors searching through jars of old pennies in basements, attics, and coin shops, hoping to stumble upon that one coin that could change their lives forever. And this is why the story of the 1958 Wheat Penny has endured and grown, passed along in numismatic circles, written about in coin guides, and whispered about at conventions. Because it represents the dream of every collector, the dream that an ordinary coin could hold extraordinary value. And when we talk about a $518 million valuation, we are really talking about the ultimate expression of that dream. And while skeptics may point out that such figures are exaggerated, that no auction has actually realized such a price, and that much of the story rests on speculation, hype, and myth-making, it does not diminish the fact that coins like the 1958 Wheat Penny embody the essence of numismatic fascination, where history, rarity, error, and human imagination collide. And so as we reflect on the reasons why this coin has captured so much attention, we realize that it is not just about copper and mint marks but about storytelling, about the narratives we attach to objects, and about how the smallest details, a doubled number, a misplaced mint mark, a cracked die, can become the foundation for legends worth hundreds of millions. And whether or not the 1958 Wheat Penny ever truly sells for $518 million, its symbolic value is already priceless, because it has become an icon of the collecting world, a reminder that treasures can hide in plain sight, and that the most ordinary objects can sometimes carry the greatest secrets. And so when you hear about the 1958 Wheat Penny, remember that it is more than just a coin, it is a story, a dream, and a symbol of what makes numismatics so endlessly fascinating. And that is why we continue to share these tales. To inspire, to captivate, and to keep alive the sense of wonder that makes collecting not just a hobby but a journey into history, mystery, and possibility. And as we conclude this deep dive, let us hold on to the thought that perhaps even now, somewhere out there, another extraordinary 1958 Wheat Penny lies waiting to be discovered, tucked away in an old collection or forgotten in a jar of change, ready to rewrite the record books and remind us all that in the world of coins, anything is possible. And that is the enduring magic of the 1958 Wheat Penny, and the reason it is celebrated as a $518 million masterpiece of error, mystery, and value beyond imagination.